how I use my walking desk treadmill and used it since I got it. So a couple of weeks ago, maybe 2 or 3 months ago, decided to get a walking treadmill. But then it actually arrived, so the sentence didn't make sense. I went through a few different options. The first one was one that was collapsible, foldable. The problem with this was that I also planned to maybe put it on an incline. An incline allows you to basically have a bigger effort per step, which would be beneficial because otherwise I would have to do so many steps and do not get any basically effort out of it. Now, I also maybe have to say that I have the constraint on me, that at least is the ideal I try to follow, that I stand all day. I don't sit down for more than 10 minutes. That's what I try to do. At least that's a habit I track. Sometimes I achieve this. I actually did very much try to do this harder, basically, before. So now I sit at the doctor's office, for example, and also, obviously, if I travel with a bus, for example, I also have to sit down. Now, apart from this, I try to stand. In addition, I wanted at least to experiment with the idea of getting steps in here. Now, in terms of architecting kind of my day. Now, there is this problem that if I get out, then I cannot really do things. Of course, you can go every now and then for a walk, for example, to get in additional steps. But I cannot really do something. I can think a little bit. I try to usually record, so I usually track something, which would be habits, which would be maybe tracking my food. But this is also not that great if you basically are constantly walking and then you're trying to type and you're basically, the phone moves in space all the time, and so well, I decided to get a treadmill in order to have a lever which I could kind of pull inside. So inside here I can do something that is active and that, first of all, is somewhat of a longer duration and still activity, and also a very short intense thing. And the short intense thing was also something that was missing. Why would I need something like this? Because it seems to be the case that if I eat certain foods, that my body goes into I don't know, in a high burn mode where I basically get too warm. And it seems to be the case that I then, if I am too much in a mode like this, then my body then seems to increase my body fat. So in order to get out of a mode like this, and then also to get steps in, to try to hit my 10,000 steps goal, which is the standard goal, I try to hit at least every single day. I don't track it that meticulously as I did a couple of weeks and months before, mostly because it now is kind of averaging out on 10,000 steps, but before it wasn't. Another reason kind of for this was also that I wanted to try again to kind of work from home. Previously I would go, apart from my side job, I would go to a library in order to study and work there, but this had a huge cost of me going there, and then you have your notebook and you have maybe also your keyboard and your mouse with you, and then you have the problem that of course you don't want it to get stolen, and you also don't want anybody to install a virus, so you have to take it with you every time you go on the toilet, or you don't, or you have somebody else that actually takes out or watches out for your stuff while you are away. But this is a big risk, and it also takes a lot of time in order to set it up then and then down again. And working with monitors with multiple monitors and not just the one, seems to be somewhat beneficial. There's also the problem in a library where you have to have a stand, because this allows you to basically keep your alertness. It seems, at least according to Andrew Huberman, if you have your screen leveled at least like this, or basically higher, then this seems to basically continue to make you alert. If you have it, basically if you're looking down, it does the opposite. So the folding one I decided to not get, even though this also came with an app. Now, I also wanted to somewhat track this, so ideally track my steps. And the main problem I ran into in terms of tracking my steps was if I have my palms rested on here, basically on my keyboard or besides my keyboard or where my mouse would be, then it doesn't track my steps. So this is somewhat of a downside. Now the app of the other thing would have actually, of the foldable one, would have tracked it. Now there also have been treadmills with others. Mostly I wanted a treadmill that looked very simple, that kind of fit into my design thinking. It's not design thinking, it's just I try to get things in black, which then allows me to record in this setup the same video. I don't have to have something that is a different shirt for different topics of videos or something like this. I just wear black. The same is true for the watches, the same is true for the background, the same is true for my freezer in the back, the same is true for my phones. So I got eventually a black one that sold on eBay, I think for around 160 or 170 euros, that is. Now this one was from China, but it was from a European, it was already in Europe, so it didn't get sent over from China or shipped over from China. Now the one I have and I'm standing on allows me actually to kind of have it in an incline. Now this could also have been the case that this actually would just tear down the motor too much, because if you have it like this, then you're basically only walking like this. But if you have it like this, then you're constantly pulling kind of the band that is on here downwards, which it seems at this point in time, at least after now 2 months or 3 months, that it still holds up. It could of course mean, it could of course also be, and probably if we just take the assumption that I would have it flat, and I then compare this to me walking on an incline basically on a treadmill that doesn't have an incline, then this probably has less of a lifetime usage compared to the other scenario. Now, in terms of elevating this, I actually have the standing desk and I put it basically on something, and this something is not part of the treadmill. There are also treadmills that have the elevation built in, but I think the problem with these is that first of all, there was no elevation that was actually 15 degrees incline, which was the one I wanted to have, because the treadmills at my gym go also to 15% incline, and so that was the ideal I try to kind of adhere to. Now, it also allows me, so the steeper it is, while still not constantly having the band rolling down, which also could be an issue. So, and this is also something I have tested out in the beginning. If I have it too much on an incline, then basically the band begins to roll itself. Now, what I can do if I'm standing on it, I can actually power it also just with my steps, but not so much in this incline now, because the thing where I put it on has gone a little bit down, so there is less of 15 degrees incline, maybe it's 12, 13, 14 degrees, which now only means, so it means that if I stand on it, it doesn't go down. Now, if you have it too much on an incline, then it probably would go down, but I also could power it just basically with my feet, even though this is probably also not good for the motor, and currently I have to really push with my hands against my desk for this to work. There is also a remote which I have kind of built into my desk down here, and this allows me to turn it on. So if I turn it on, I just press it and then I press it again. So there's the stop button. Then there is also a button for increasing the speed and decreasing the speed. Now you hear it running. I also had this idea, what if I just during videos basically do my steps? Now I noticed that there is kind of a decline, so now you hear it running. Now it's running on 3 kilometers per hour, I think. It also tracks the calories, so it has a small display. But I wanted to now discuss kind of the use of this and not so much the treadmill itself. Now, how would I use it in the beginning? So first of all, I had to come up with this concept of putting it on an incline, and where would I attach it? So I have these two stands, which are basically like this, and then I have a metal rod that is from my bed frame, and I have this with cable binders attached to basically the stands of my desk. Now, this means now I have it on an incline. In the beginning I would try to use it just without powering it on, but eventually I realized that this would allow me to basically make faster steps, because otherwise when trying to power the treadmill, you're basically constantly, if you want to have it just on the edge of being able to be walkable with basically your feet pushing down, then you're also maybe going down already if you don't want to walk. And so there is this thing where it's on the edge, and now I'm standing on it quite securely, and if I turn it on, I turn it on. Now in the beginning I just took a couple of steps, and usually in the distribution part of making videos I would basically just distribute the videos, which is usually just clicking through a couple of things. Of course you also need to concentrate, but less compared to making videos, for example, or doing something else which is mentally more demanding. Now this would be the first scenario. I also then tried, just when brushing my teeth, to take a couple of extra steps. I also sometimes just throw it on occasionally, and also if I actually kind of am somewhat relaxing. So this was also an idea that at least every couple of weeks to months to maybe years, mostly it's probably weeks to days, I basically watch something on my notebook. And if I watch something on my notebook, I might as well take steps in the meanwhile. And so this was also an idea to kind of avoid watching something on my notebook, for example, where I would just sit down and do nothing and then get up and everything would hurt because I did not have a good posture. If instead I would now basically be able to, at my desk, do this, then, well, it would be different. But part of a problem, so there's a partial problem at least with this thinking, which is that if I'm at my desk, I'm usually working. And if I now also watch something at my desk, then the association is kind of both. And this makes it harder, I think, to then try to work at your desk in this case, which is in this case also kind of my office or video studio or whatever you want to call it, or also my computer space. Now, there is an additional use I want to discuss, which is sprinting on the treadmill, or walk sprinting, so walking very fast on the treadmill for 1 minute. So I did this in part to try to increase my Garmin endurance score, but the problem with this is that for 1 minute I don't record the activity itself, so therefore it only goes into the Garmin IQ points. So I do track my activities with a Garmin watch, and I also have a Galaxy Watch 4 on me. Now, first of all, if I take steps, then both of these devices, if I have my hands on here, don't recognize the steps, which makes it activity that is only tracked, at least in terms of heart rate, but not in terms of steps, which in terms of increasing my step count does not make that much sense. So the only way I can actually increase my step count with this treadmill would be if I just watch something and then do this, because there are not many other things I can do without using my hands on a computer. Now the second scenario would be for recording videos, but I think I need to be kind of more mentally on point in videos, and it probably would also improve the videos in the future. So at least as of currently, I'm not walking while recording videos. And also there is basically this hurdle you need to overcome, which is to turn it on and to turn it off again. And if I just say, okay, I want to record a video, and then there are less additional steps that are required to then record a video, then it just makes it more likely that I record videos. So this makes basically video recording cover a more range of ideas, because I'm just recording kind of more of the things I would have been thinking about in terms of recording videos. Now, the second use worked quite fine in the beginning, which is the sprint. And this also seems to somewhat take away it seems to take some, I assume that this is happening. If I overconsume in carbs, then my body often gets hot, my hands get hot, especially in summer. This then turns the next hours into something that is not very pleasant, or in terms of the pleasantness of this, it's maybe a 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, I don't know. But I need to cool my body down, or I need to do something that is active. Now, cooling my body down seems to be often the better option, but how do you cool your body down in summer without going into a cold plunge, which I don't have accessible, and maybe by additionally showering cold, but there are only so many times you can shower in a day, and it also then takes a toll on the skin. So the only other option would be to be active, but if you don't now want to go for a 2-hour run in order to make up for all of the carbs you have eaten, and of course you also try to work during the day, so this is kind of a no-brainer in this case, then there was this idea, what if I could just have something where I am slightly active? Now, the first part of this was that I would introduce kind of trekking during the day. So I take maybe 2 to 3 walks during the day where I just go outside. In winter, I can then do cold exposure. So I just walk outside in jeans and also usually this shirt for 10 minutes, and this then allows me to cool down my body. Now, in the summer, it's different, and also in the winter, if I additionally need something that takes more glucose basically out of my bloodstream that comes in from my gut, and to basically decrease the negative impact the ingestion of food otherwise would have had, then I need something that is active. And so what I have been doing is that I then, if I made a kind of nutritional mistake, that I then would at least do 1 minute sprint. Now, it's not a sprint, it's just walking very fast on this treadmill. Now, in the beginning, I tried basically 5 kilometers per hour on this maybe 12, 13, 14, 15 degrees of incline, and at this incline, if I walked just a little bit, it would also increase my body temperature, which also would be somewhat useful for body temperature control in winter. Whenever I got too cold, maybe also because I didn't eat that much during the day, then I also was able to basically increase my body temperature with this and not feel that cold any longer. Now, the other thing would be, so it's not another thing. I then try to basically increase the speed at which I would be able to walk at, and this actually fairly increased. So there have been a couple of minutes of basically using this where I walk very fast for a minute, where I was able to have the 9.5 kilometers per hour walking speed. But at least as of the last couple of minutes I did this in, I then found myself kind of going over into a run. So I basically would have only 1 foot on the treadmill compared to walking, where you usually, I think, have just 2 feet on the ground. So this was usually somewhat effective, I would say. It also would increase my body temperature. It also sometimes would even in the 1 minute break a sweat, which then basically also further cooled my body, but it probably also would take, it's maybe similar or comparable, I think, to maybe sprinting for 1 minute on the assault bike. Andrew Huberman and also Andy Galpin on Andrew Huberman or on Huberman Lab talked about this idea of, I think they called it workout snacks, so that you would ramp up your system, your body, and measured with your heart rate mostly, I think, or also your respiratory rate a couple of times a day. This could be just randomly sprinting up the stairs somewhere. This could be, I don't know, instead of walking to the grocery store, sprinting to the grocery store, or doing a couple of jumping jacks in between a break or something like this. Of course, there is the social cost of doing this and then looking like a weirdo, but nonetheless, I then started to also see this kind of as an exercise snack, even though I also now want to at least claim that I also did this already previously. And so once Huberman named it, now it's named, it's called an exercise snack. So this has been a kind of a short conclusion. Now what I also have to mention is that once I then found out that once I did no longer commute to the library and back every single day, which would usually be 3 to 6 kilometers, and an additional activity also recorded in Garmin of 10 to 20 minutes, that I would have basically a loss in total activity minutes, and then also kind of at least low aerobic activity. And this was kind of missing. Now this is not steps because I'm cycling there and I'm cycling back, but this was kind of missing. And what I noticed is this is also maybe a point, or this is also maybe an advantage of Garmin's endurance score. So I have my VO2 max on Garmin, which is also kind of a cardiorespiratory marker, but not also, it's a cardiorespiratory marker that might be the most important in terms of predicting cardiorespiratory fitness, which seems to be linked to longevity. Now, if I didn't go to the library, I was missing the 10 to 20 minutes of additional activity, which then showed in my endurance score, and it went down from 7,300 to 6,000 and around 900, 800, or something like this. And then I figured what I could do to basically work against this. And so the sprinting and the walking does not really help that much, because the walking itself does not increase the endurance score, I think. So there are only if you have an actually manually tracked activity, it seems to impact the endurance score and also VO2 max. But what I then did to basically work against this is that I would have an additional small workout in the evening. I usually try working out 30 to 40 minutes in the morning, core time, and then I would have maybe an additional small workout in the evening. This could be running to a river, which would take me a couple of minutes, then 10 minutes of swimming in the river, and then 10 minutes of running back. So I try to aim at 30 minutes from activity switch to the end of the activity, of 30 minutes to 40 minutes. Sometimes it's also a kind of a big workout with 50 minutes or 60 minutes, but I don't know. I just gave myself a little more leeway with this in order to be able to vary my activities a little bit.